Kia ora koutou, koe nei te mea ki a koutou I tēnei wā. Nō reira, nau mai, haere mai. Haere mai ki te whakatorongo ki tēnei kōrero e pāna ki taku ara, he hata kupu. Ara ki te tikina I ngā mātauranga o a tātou tupuna. Nā reira tēnā koutou. Just to start with, Cindy reminded me today when the whai kōrero was on down below that I must first of all acknowledge Huia, who is my wife of 50 years. And my pathway wouldn't be the pathway that I'm on if it hadn't been for her. So to my wife Huia, this is my mihi ki a koe. Now, I have to read this because I'm going to ad-lib the rest. Essentially, the presentation traces a number of encounters with people and places which have resulted in a number of illustrated children's books way back when, an animated film way back when, an indigenous visual arts program called Toyoho Ki Āpiti at Manawatu, and culminating in an outline of a forthcoming publication that I'm working on, which is on Understanding Māori art from carving and sculpture. Okay, so if I miss anything, too bad. Sorry. Oh. Okay, I want to start with this image because this work was created by these lovely ladies here. These three over here are graduates of the Toyoho Ki Āpiti program. This is Dr. Teri Tato. This is Bridget Rewiti, who is currently the Francis Hodgkins Fellow in Dunedin, and this is Erin Baker Rewiti, who is now a lecturer on our program in Palmerston North. The program is now over 25 years old, and in 5 years ago, it culminated in it was a celebration of the Bachelor of Māori Visual Arts program. And just last year, we celebrated the Master's program that I created as part of the whole structure of Toyoho Ki Āpiti. This work, by the way, is in, I get them all mixed up, Ottawa, Toronto. It was created specially for an exhibition in Toronto, and it was made by these girls. They are called Mataaho, and their current rise to fame is enormous. They are in the Walters exhibition at the Auckland Art Gallery, and they will represent New Zealand at, in Sydney Biennale next year. So they're doing very well. I'm very proud of them, as you can imagine. And one of the reasons I start with an image is to, it becomes my allegory for a karanga because I like to recognise mana wahine. So they are my introduction really to this talk. Oops, sorry. Okay, now this photo is of my ancestral house. It's called Taharora. It's at Waipiro Bay and it's blue. It is the only house on the East Coast that is blue. Now, just a little story before I start. This is my cousin, Rahera. She is pointing to the kōruru, that is my ancestor, Taharora. And over here is a student that I taught at Wairiki Polytechnic years ago, and he was responsible for carving the maihi, the kōruru, and also the amo of this house. Now, interesting story, he turned up with the carvings, painted white. My kuia kaumātua cried tears because finally some carving, some real Māori art had arrived on the marae that we could put up. Because I did the inside of the house a few years before that, and they don't kind of consider it to be Māori art. Anyway, so I painted the house blue, and of course the carver, Simon Lardelli, was upset because I painted it blue instead of red. Not only that, I have an auntie called Auntie Queenie, and she heard that I had done something mischievous back home, and she called on one of my cousins, And she said, go down and find out what that fellow is doing. I hear he's up to mischief down at that marae. And sure enough, Elder turned up. He drove past the marae, but he didn't come in. He stopped out on the road, sort of gazed over, and went back home. The next day he went out on a boat, went fishing to get his crayfish pots, and he looked back up and he saw the house, because you can see it from the sea. And he loved it. So anyway, it ended up being blue. But as a consequence of painting this house blue, I had to go back to my marae and defend painting this house blue, which I did. You know, I gave them the story of the origin of carving from the ocean, which was number one. That was good. Now, on the East Coast, we had a clay which is called tutai whetu, star excrement. And only Ngāti Porou used this particular clay, and it was a blue clay that we used on our carvings. That was reason number two. Reason number three, I had an ancestor called Riwai Pakero who actually built this house, and he used unorthodox colours. So I said, if he can do it, so can I. Anyway, to end the long story short, in justifying the colours, I had a granduncle who stood up at the end after I gave my kōrero. And he said, in Māori, ko kikorangi te rangi, ko kikorangi te moana, ko kikorangi te whare, ko kikorangi te tangata. In other words, he was saying he's also blue. His name was Tom Te Maro, but his nickname was Tommy Blue. End of story. The house is blue today. Anyway, moving on. Oh, sorry, wrong one again. Oh, this is my grandmother. Now, her name is Mary Wharepapa. Her grandmother was a weaver. She was also a weaver. It was her vision that I would actually do the house, right? Unfortunately, the year in which the house was completed, the inside of the house, not the outside, because we didn't complete the house outside of the house till 2001. This is in 1999. She passed away. So the year before that, when I completed the dining room, the murals in the dining room, I lost a brother. And so what that did, it kind of made me step back and stop this production or this process of creating the house, because I was afraid other things would happen. You know, it's kind of part of the narrative associated with building houses that you lose something or you lose someone. So it wasn't until a decade later that I completed the house and of course painted it blue. Right. Now that kind of gives you, you know, some of the images that are in the house. The paintings on this have been created by, I'll give you name dropping here. This is painted by Kura Te Waru Rewiri, okay, who's a famous Māori female, painter. Sorry, this thing's playing up for me. Thank you. This one over here is painted by Shane Cotton. Okay, you guys heard of Shane Cotton? Yep. And this one is painted by Saffron Ratana, and the worst painting of all is by me, this one over here. But this house is a house that brought together a lot of artists from around the country, contemporary Māori artists, but also carvers, like Lionel Grant also contributed to the house. So, you know, just a bit of name dropping. But moving to the next image, Ron Bacon. I met Ron Bacon in the 70s when I was still at the Elam School of Fine Arts, and he approached me to do an illustration for a children's book. That led to a series of books, children's books, with Ron as the author and me as the illustrator. And then I move on to this. I'll finish with this image. I mean, I always run out of time, but don't worry about it. This is based on a very famous carving. And what it is, this is called Te Tairuku Pōtaka. Oops, sorry, it's a, carving, a pātaka carving that is in the Auckland Museum. If you get a chance, go and look at it. This is a whale's head. This is the head with the eye. Oop. This is the mouth. That is the body. And there are like tiki images over the top actually hauling the whale. So I use that whale image as the basis for that children's book, or the illustration. Significantly, the publication that I'm working on at the moment also has this image in it. In other words, I'm going from being an illustrator to a writer. And what I do is I talk about this incredibly, in terms of a tonga, in terms of whakaido, in terms of carving, this is so significant in terms of its excellence, and it's a seminal masterpiece within Māori art. And so that's my next project. Write a book, get stuff out. I've done about 4 chapters. Or was it 5? No, 4, and I've got 2 to go, and I have to finish the book. Otherwise, my wife's going to leave me. No, come on. Anyway, it's short, sweet. Thank you very much for coming. Ngā mihi ki au puta.